Welcome to Parables in Ink. In this Bible verse, it starts out with the knocking and asking God for things and God providing for you. Now, a lot of people take that to mean that He will provide anything for you, but then He goes on to talk about good gifts, and if people who are evil know how to get good gifts to their children, how much more would He give His children? Well, God obviously is not going to give you something that's bad for you. For example, if you ask for money, but you're addicted to drugs, that would be a difficult thing for Him to give you money because you have something in your life that has become an idol, something that is pulling you away from a relationship with Him. So I focus on the door over here and talk about the knocking and receiving, and I lead that into the narrow gate versus the wide path. So when it talks about the narrow gate, it's not really referring to the path being difficult to get to Christ or to get to heaven or eternal life. It is not a way that people will willingly travel. And it's also the only way in this path here to get to the cross, to get to heaven and eternal life. There's a much easier path which leads to things of the world, and I use things of the world here, and I intentionally used things that are not necessarily bad. For example, we have a little DVD player, we have a game system, a television. Instead of drawing some kind of scene on the TV, I just put words: fame, lust, greed, a little iPad or tablet device that says buy, 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 an empty box, some money. And then down here I have some things, and you'll notice that they are death related. I have a sword, a black flag, which is usually refers to death, and a noose, and then I have a dead end sign, and then I have some graves down here, and you can kind of start to see that this in here starts to form a skull. Now, a reason I took this progression was because these things aren't necessarily evil, and a lot of kids, when they see the video and people will ask, well, is money evil, or is my television evil, and should I get rid of it? No. They're not evil by themselves. They're just things. But they can become idols and gods in our life that pull us away from where we should be looking and heading towards, which is towards God, towards Jesus Christ. We also have some things here like music, and later in the verses it gets into about the false prophets. False prophets are teachers who are deliberately teaching false doctrine. These are doctrines, these are things that have a flavoring of Christianity or of Jesus' teachings, but when you really dissect them, there's very little about salvation, very little about eternal life. They teach things like peace, they teach prosperity and wealth, they teach about love, but it's all human-based. It's not of God, it is a creation of man. So you'll notice that he kind of has some wolf-like features, some sharp fingers, kind of long and extended. His face is kind of angular, and he has some long ears, almost like a wolf. And you'll notice that he's actually carrying a Bible. Some of these people can be church leaders, and they will think that they're on the right path, but really they're self-serving, and they're serving themselves and not God. it is something to be aware of when you see new teachings or people that have found new stuff, or you should be concerned and you should compare that with the Bible. So I have a gentleman right here that I've drawn, and you see the got a question mark on his shirt, and it's like, which path should I follow? This way is kind of, it's narrow and the door is open, so it's kind of welcoming, but you really don't see what's behind the door. So you really don't have a clear idea of what this path is that's going to lead you to the cross. So there's kind of a commitment there. On the other hand, all this stuff is kind of out in the open, and it's very enticing. But the fact of where it leads is not exactly clear, and I kind of intentionally made this unclear as to being a defined skull and just having it things that kind of make up a skull, because you really don't see the end result of this path. So then we get into the person who has to make a decision. This person has been faced with a word, and do they continue on the path that they've been traveling, or do they go God's way? And then we lead into the house built on the rock and the sand. Of course, I didn't really get into that and illustrate that out, because this really focuses on the narrow gate versus the wide path. But there's a lot of things here that still kind of relate to that. It's the idea of building your foundation on God versus building your foundation on things of the world. These things will fade away. We've got game systems that will be replaced by newer game systems. We've got money that will come and go. We've had recessions and stock market crashes, and people have lost a considerable amount of money. You may be rich one day, you may be poor the next. So money is clearly not a place where you can truly put your faith and trust, although a lot of people do. Some people look towards fame to make them happy, worldly pleasures, buying things as a way of replacing a need for God. And those are obviously things that are, well, not obvious to some people, but those are things that will eventually fade away with time. Thank you for watching Parables in Ink.